I would like to refer anyone listening to the book I wrote called The Gift, a Primal Provision, which pretty well covers events of the first 10 years of now 39 years of being focused on research of the leaf gel of aloe vera. On page about 91, 92 is the story of the most remarkable response in an individual with severe autism, of many different stories that I received, that with more comprehensive nutrition centered on the active ingredient from the aloe leaf gel, which is acetylated mannose for short, called ace-mannin, has a remarkable influence on brain function. And in fact, if anyone is interested in this, my email is capital R and the rest is lowercase, R McDaniel, McDaniel, at wellnessquest, WELLNESSQUST.org, R McDaniel at wellnessquest.org. And I have a file of about 26 papers that have been published focusing on improved brain function by more comprehensive nutrition, because every organ in the body operates better at a higher level with more comprehensive nutrition. Fact is, that's the basis that the code in DNA, which is absolutely incredible, to take absolutely lifeless molecules that are nutrients and hook them together in cellular synthesis to make bioactive molecules that run the biochemistry of life in every organ. And the brain function is not excluded from this improved function. And this led to being asked to speak at a conference in Los Angeles about the benefits of more comprehensive nutrition for academic performance of young people. The spectrum that medicine refers to as autism is a very challenging subject. And I think about, you can notice on Google, it states that if you tell me the truth or a fact, I'll forget it. If you teach me a principle, I will struggle to know when and how to apply it. But it said, if you tell me a story, I have it forever. And my first experience with autism was in El Paso, where a young Hispanic couple were coming up the elevator as we had finished a noon lecture period, and they came through the door as we were going. So for just a few minutes, I talked to them there in the hall and told them of the wonderful things that could happen. The lady had been a victim of what we'd call chronic fatigue for several years. And that night, when I was finishing at a lecture at the local college, my phone rang, and she was on the phone, and she basically said, how long is it supposed to be before this has some benefit? And I said, well, why? And she says, well, the couple that invited us gave me a bottle of the dietary supplement that you're lecturing on, and said, I can't believe it. I cleaned up the house and getting things straight that I've been putting off for several years. I can't believe how much energy I have, and how I just cannot believe. I'm wondering if I can even go to sleep tonight. Well, that was impressive, but my phone rang not long after I had left El Paso and was back at home. And she says, what is this supposed to do for children? And I says, well, what do you mean? He says, well, our son, and if I recall, he was around 5 or 6 years old, goes to a special school, and they're trying to help him because they say he has a tendency toward the autism spectrum, and said, my husband goes by and he's supposed to put everything on his desk in the right place before he can leave, and says, my husband has to help him, and says, we started him on it, and says, when my husband gets there, he's got everything done, he's ready to get in the car and go, and says he's begun to come out of his shell like we've never seen before. And then she told how the reason she was calling me is that they typically put him to bed and went to their room, and said in the night, his voice rang out and says, Mama, Daddy, I love you. And she said that was the first time in all his years he had ever expressed any kind of emotion or affection, and said we cried ourselves to sleep that night. Does this stuff help autism? I said, well, apparently it helped your son, but one drop of rain does not a flood make. But I said, this is just wonderful. And many times over the years, I have had that words of that mother echoing in my voice about how parents, and particularly the mother, can spend so much time trying to help a child uh, grow up and go through learning how to walk, learning how to eat, learning how to feed themselves, bathing them, and never getting any kind of eye contact or any type of affection shown. And how this mother voice, when she said their son, had said, Mama, Daddy, I love you. And so that was just the first time that this had happened. Now, in a book I wrote, The Gift, A Primal Provision, covers approximately the first 10 years of now 39 years of being focused on the research on the active ingredient from aloe leaf gel. And on page 91, there's a story of Ryan Bianco uh, from up in the northwestern sector of the United States. And this story, I'll briefly tell you that a couple that had been distributors in the company that I was the medical director for had a special banquet to recognize people for their contributions and growth in the company. And they both came up to the microphone and says, thank you very much, everyone that's helped us get to this level. But the only reason we're really here, we've asked to speak. And so they separated, and this mother came to the phone and told a story that had virtually everyone in tears about her son, Ryan, that she said had never shown any affection or emotion, said he couldn't tell himself from a chair. His autism was so bad. And one of the things was if the mother or the father was not present in the room, he screamed constantly. She said he screamed so desperately and loud that even neighbors had called the police to come. They thought they were doing something terrible to Ryan. And she said that for ever since he'd been born, that she and her husband had never been able to do anything separately. One or the other had to be there. And then she told how she heard that the more comprehensive nutrition that we were offering as a dietary supplement should be tried, and that a paper had been published in Massachusetts of a number of autistic children that had benefits. So they tried it on Ryan. Well, the room was darkened, and I was at one of the tables. And as she left the stage, I went down the aisle in the dark and followed her because she said, Ryan is at the table with us tonight. And he has been very receptive. He's enjoyed himself and he's behaving just fine. And so I wanted to meet Ryan. And so as we went up to the table, I was shocked because I was kind of looking down, expecting to see a 4 or 5 year old little boy in a handsome 18-year-old stood up, put his hand out, shook hands with me, and thanked me for all this research and for what it had done for him. This was Ryan. And I just was shocked beyond words that he was telling me this. And as I went back to the table, I just couldn't hardly believe that what had just happened. And on the telephone in a few weeks, the mother phoned me and said, I told you how my son Ryan didn't know himself from the wall and the pictures in his room or his bed or anything. He just wasn't aware of himself, and said he called to me and said, "Say, mother, come in here," and said he was in the bathroom and he had cleaned himself, showered, and was combing his hair, and he says, "Look in the mirror there." Says, "I'm a handsome young man." And she was in tears saying that before this image in the mirror, it didn't mean a thing to him, that he was aware of himself like he had never been before. And I oftentimes wonder now, separated through the years, just how far along Ryan was able to advance from what had been diagnosed by all the specialists as severe autism. Now, in Massachusetts, Susan Nisenwig was a counselor, and she had a son that was autistic, and she gave him the more comprehensive nutrition built around the active ingredient in the aloe plant. And her paper is published in the Proceedings of the Fisher Institute, and this is the first page of it. And she sent out a invitation to 40 parents that had the diagnosis of autism in their child. And 25 of those 40 completed the form that she sent them, which was a 63% response rate. And of that 25, 21 of them completed the forms and study requirements. And in this, she asked about the pregnancy history of what are the symptoms of your child? Has the family any history of similar symptoms? The amount of the dietary supplement that was used and how it was done during their study. And then on a 4-point scale, she compared the dietary supplement level of the activity of the child with the post-supplement activity, and particularly had the mothers evaluate their use of language, showing cognition, understanding things, their sensory responses, because these autistic children are very different from other children. In fact, getting them to eat is a real challenge at times, because just the feeling of different foods in the mouth just drive them up the wall, and they just won't even touch some things. And they, from the mother's evaluation about how they responded to touch and their behavior, and for 3 months, they were on a dietary supplementation to see if it would have some effect. It was made up of 4 girls and 17 boys, which is not uncommon to be more active in boys. And they ranged in age from 3 to 15 years. And the 13 were less than 7 years old. And actually, over the period of observation, ranged from a minimum of 3 to 18 months. And 10 of them, these children, they went for 3 to 6 months. And 20 took the children's phytobears, which is a formulation to attract young people, children, and they would take 2 to 8 a day. And some of them took capsules of the formulation that was multiple nutrients added to the active ingredient from the aloe. Now, 14 of them were also taking vitamins and homeopathic preparations and antifungal drugs and even tranquilizers to try to calm them down and make living in the home a little better. 7 of the children were having auditory training, going for behavior modification and speech training. 1 was having chiropractic manipulations, and they all were trying to improve their diets. The histories of them, that there was only 1 in the group that had a high risk pregnancy. There were 2 breech deliveries. There were 7 of them that had problems at delivery or pre-delivery, mostly prolonged labors. They also got the history of had the mother taken any amphetamines or had alcohol exposure? Did they have a cord around the neck? And as I said before, the dystocia is the term for prolonged labor. And 1 of them had a 19-hour Pitocin drip, which causes a contraction of the uterus. And they responding to the children who were born, several of them had blood sugars that were low. 1 child had a Coxsackie virus infection at the time of the autism onset, that they tried to say maybe this had something to do with it, since nobody knows what caused it. Only 1 had the diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, which is a tendency toward autism. 1 child had attention deficit hyperactive disorder. 1 had oppositional disorder, and 1 was manic depressive, very high, very low emotional behaviors. Half of them had major behavior problems and repetitive acts. 15 out of these had this problem. And they were particularly noted, will just bounce their head forward, maybe on something hard or a chair or a table, or just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And 15 of them had never made eye contact with their parents. 13 had no appetite. I mentioned before that actually the feeling of the food of different types in their mouth, the children just can't tolerate it, and 17 of them had that problem. And speech problems and communicating orally was a problem in 20 of the children. Now, in these different things, you can see the eye contact, the appetite, the variety of foods, write down all these properties, and they have this column, was it a minor or a terrible problem? And you can see that there's pretty high incidence of nearly all of these problems that you see in autism. which are listed in that column to the left. And then you have a column there where they much improved, and then they had estimated how much they'd improved. And the incidents of improvement were high, and the parent, and particularly the mother, I'm staggered by the high percentage. If you'll notice, they run from the 70s to the 95% improvement in these different autistic symptoms. But this is what was in the published paper. And there were different other problems with these autistic children, which there were 21 of them, that not only the autism, but they had allergies, they had asthma, ear infections, sinus problems, rashes that are bad, chronic diarrhea, and chronic constipation. And you can see it was a minor or a terrible problem in the instance there in that column, and that the improvements that were seen were significant, particularly in allergies and in constipation. And then we have this column that the mother says, well, what percent improvement would you guess had happened? And of course, it varies from 64% to virtually 100%. But they had some notes here that two of the children had severe ear infections as a problem, and there was marked improvement. And this is significant because in the original research at Carrington Laboratory, it was found out that all infections, whether it be viral, bacterial, fungal, or even malaria in Africa, improved, that it boosts the body's host defense mechanism, both cellular and humoral, that this was the original intent of Carrington Laboratories to develop a antiviral drug, and they found out it was far more than just antiviral. It was anti-infectious agent. And these autistic children also had other problems, as you can see, that improved that they included in this published paper. All the children were continued on their supplements after the post-observation period, which is not just real common in this nutritional research, I would say. I think people are so drug-oriented that they just can't believe that nutrition is doing everything that they see happen. And of course, we relied more on the mother's estimations of improvement than anything else. And the children were still autistic, but their autistic symptoms were much improved. So we should not claim nor represent there was not elimination of the autism, but all the symptoms of autism were improved. And they're participating in the process of life and interacting with their surroundings were markedly improved. The children were received and paid attention to instructions and showed evidence of learning, that there was a broad variety of benefits that the children received, some of them much more than others, and some quite minimal, depending on what the problem was in the child. In this pilot study, they felt like that controlled formal studies should be carried out. Well, the next thing that I will mention time and time again is you saw a little bit of this in these children, is what I call the white box effect. is that the FDA has a term called black box for drugs when they find out they have toxicities and side effects much worse than originally when the drug was approved. And they have the source of the medication to put a black label and call it the black box effect of this drug that people should be aware of. Well, these children showed improvements in things beside their autism. And this is something I saw repeatedly as medical director for an international dietary supplement company, is where individuals had 5 or more challenges that are deviations from normal health. And lo and behold, as you improve the nutrition, it seemed like number one, the greatest threat to life, which is, I would say, infectious processes. Very few people realize that in the pre-antibiotic and pre-sulfa drug era, that the number one cause of death in the United States was infections. Well, it's been dropped significantly out of the top 10 causes of death because of the presence and the ubiquitous use of antibiotics and antivirals. But this white box effect is just a theory, and we thought an opportunity to test it in a clinical facility in India, but we could not get the funding to do the study to prove the white box effect, because the bishop in the Indian Catholic Church that had realized the benefits of the paper that I did under request by the United Nations, which was basically, the title was a economical way to improve the health of mass populations and by more comprehensive nutrition. And this bishop said there is no way, there's so many people living in India in abject poverty that the country does not have the resources to build the medical schools, to train the doctors and nurses, build the hospitals and clinics to practice Western therapy, diagnosis and therapy, that it's just too expensive. But this is the most economical and safest way. And we were going to try to test this white box effect in some of these very destitute individuals, that even the autistic children were showing evidence of other deviations from normal health improving by just more comprehensive nutrition.